Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and joining me, my co-host, indie designer working on the upcoming game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It has been a busy week for me. Unreal Engine released the 5.1, so we've been mucking around with that. Samurai Pig and also the Splinter Cell division for Rooster Rampage. So it's just been a ton of work, and in that regard, so yeah, enjoying it. All the new features, really good, nice feature set and everything. Other than that, how are you doing, Josh?
It's been a kind of a rough week, sadly. I had a family member passed away,
Man.
and just still working through that. And apparently, we are officially in winter time because I went out for my daily walk, and now I irritated my ear, so I'm hearing like a ringing in my right ear like constantly. So
Yeah,
it's just been one of those weeks.
one of those weeks. Been there, man. I know that. I feel you. So my condolences for everything on that
Thank
for
you.
sure, Josh. Yeah.
And some good news, I did get my indie post blew up on Twitter because I think everyone else is
Yeah.
leaving on Twitter, so I may be the sole de facto person on
You're
Twitter.
the remaining, the last man standing, Josh.
That's gonna be my YouTube strategy. All the other game YouTubers go away, I'll be the only one.
Only one.
So I got about like 30 different indie game submissions. So that's going to keep me busy for the next few weeks. And of course, when I make my weekly post next week, we'll see if anyone else comments.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I know that took a while to get through your DMs and clear out all the devs would have going viral, man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
Never had that many responses before, so it's been crazy. But
Yeah. The vibe in Twitter is very interesting right now. If you're still hanging around and checking it out, I know you're still there. You're still actively posting and everything. So,
mm-hmm.
Chris,
Hey,
welcome.
Chris. Yep, and we do have to do a conversation either here or on a roundtable about like
Roundtable,
social
yeah.
media and all that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it has just been swirling around in my head. It has been just there's a lot of takes here and there concerning that for sure, and it's vital. Social media as a way to get out, like different ways to communicate. We've talked about it before, but I don't think we've ever seen like possible landscape change like this before. So definitely something we need to go over in the
Mm-hmm.
future, Josh, for sure.
Yep. And probably this coming week, I'll post the first episode of our influential games series with Seth, and
Yeah.
we're going to try and get another one, or we're going to try and do some kind of recording over this next week. We'll see how wrangling everyone is going to work. Because Josh over here has now gotten like the first hand approach of how challenging it is to set these things
Yeah,
up.
definitely.
Happy birthday to Emily, Chris.
Emily, yeah, happy birthday. Right on.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we're going to probably check out Dark Tide when it gets released for everyone else, I think, next week. So that's going to be something to look forward to. And it's actually, I think, a really good point for... She's napping on the couch. The napping on the couch, that's not a good point for our conversation, but... but Dark Tide, I think, is a
As soon
really...
as we came on, she
Yeah. Hey, Vincent. But
it's
Dark Tide and kind of AA games, I think, is a really good way to begin our conversation about the idea of cinematic or prestige games. I couldn't think of like which term would fit better, but one of the things that we have seen, I think, over the past decade, maybe arguably even a little bit before that, with the rise of Grand Theft Autos, Uncharted, and so on, has been this kind of Hollywood chase by a lot of developers. And we can look at this from two distinct sides. From the AAA space, it's the idea of making the Hollywood blockbuster or, the Emmy movie. And we can see this with kind of I'm not sure how I want to say this, like the seriousness of a lot of AAA games. Your Tomb Raiders, Last of Us, trying to think of any other big AAA examples.
God of War.
Yeah, even God of
God of
War.
War, yeah.
BioWare games have been, I think, one of the big examples of this as well. And then we look at this from the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. We have the indie, the art house game That game that is supposed to tell like a very moving story. It's not really focused on the gameplay. It's more about, what you're experiencing. So this would be stuff like Gone Home, Dear Esther, What Remains of Edith Finch, and even games that we've been seeing lately that try to do something that's very story driven or unique. Somerville, that just came out on
Yeah.
Games Pass, would be an example. Pentiment, which I don't know if you saw that one. That was a game from Obsidian Studios that just
No,
came
I did
out.
not. No, I was just going through Somerville
Hmm.
prior to this. It's a little bit. No, not that one yet.
Yeah, and hello, Thomas, as well.
Hey,
And
Thomas.
when we look at these games, and again, bring this back to like a game like Dark Tide and a lot of AA games, they are, we can guarantee they are video games. They're not meant to be, the game you're going to be seeing on the Oscar night or Emmy night. They're not meant to tell anything greater than big evil aliens, go shoot them, or again, if it's Warhammer, use some variant of a chainsaw and
Yeah,
chop them off.
chainsaw axe.
Hmm. And to bring this to our topic, over the past 20 years, as we really saw the game industry embrace 3D with Grand Theft Auto, Metal Gear, and so on, we've had this kind of like in the back burner chase of the Hollywood prestige. And I want to get your thoughts on this because you've been gaming for I think about the same time as I
Yeah,
have. So
yeah,
we grew up, and again, when we did our platformer talk, we talked about the era of Mario and Sonic, where,
yeah,
the most shocking story was, Dr. Wily's going to betray us for the eighth time,
yeah, yeah.
or Robotnik really wants those Chaos Emeralds.
Man, he wanted those emeralds bad,
Hmm.
Josh. Like he would not give up. It was just,
Hmm.
yeah. And I like, and I think we've talked about it before about like the actual age of the industry, right? Like the industry is still, I don't even know what era we would call it. Probably later we'll give each time an era. But we're still like still an infancy. It's still very an infant. Everything's being discovered on how to do certain things. And I think at one point, chasing
Hmm.
the Hollywood, like especially when we started getting like voice actors and we started getting just like the CGI was a little pumped up and we were able to do that, that they really started chasing, yeah, like Hollywood style things. And like Somerville I was playing and like I don't know, we're gonna get into it later, but I was like, in fact, to make it more cinematic and feel more, there's like less UI, less interactivity, things like that, so things get sacrificed. Anyway, that's a side point. But I feel okay. So here's the thing: is like video games are an interactive experience, and right, and when you're trying to tell a story, I believe the best way to tell a story is through interaction, right? Allowing the player to discover the story at their own pace through environmental storytelling, etc. But being like forced to watch like a Michael Bay cutscene or something like that, unskippable things like that, that really gets in the way of the whole experience. Just as bad as kludgy UI as a story stopping me and telling me how I'm supposed to interpret or understand or see this framing when it might not be framed very well anyway by this studio, right? It's
Hmm.
always something that you have to keep in mind. Welcome, Pony.
Yep, hey, Pony. We're talking about kind of Hollywood prestige, that kind of chase of, trying to tell, it's not just a game or a film, it's, an experience. It's that thing that, everyone must watch. And yeah, like to your point, like it really wasn't until the 2000s, especially we relate this to television, that we saw this idea of trying to grow up. That,
Yeah,
if we look at shows, look at TV, the 2000s brought us The Wire, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, many other shows. Like this was this period where a TV show had to tell a point. That it had to be not just, wacky hijinks, the 80s and 90s were, the sitcom era, the
yeah.
2000s, and even into the 2010s. Oh, yeah, we'll probably get to the games as our point at some point as well. And it had to be more. Like, there was the idea that a TV show couldn't just be entertaining. It couldn't just feature,
Yeah.
wacky story. It had to have, some kind of major point. And the same thing we could say about video games. And this is one of those things, I'm writing a post about this at the same time, that there's this just general feeling that some people they're making video games despite maybe not liking or trying to downplay what makes a video game. And to your point, the idea of interactivity is a big one. That we can't just have the player running and jumping and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We need to keep things very grounded. And grounded could be, I think, a really good adjective for what we're talking about. That it's about removing kind of the gaminess and instead focusing on more of a grounded sense of it. And even with that said, it's also about, when we talk about the Hollywood blockbuster, like how many AAA games feature more, movie stars and celebrities than they may feature, professional voice actor or voice actress. Or they only go for, the highest of the high tier because that's where they get their money.
Yeah, definitely, Josh.
And yeah, Two Ponies kind of about like Hellblade, Last of Us, like some of these games, like for a lot of the first time games, like Hellblade is such an unusual game in this respect.
Yeah,
that
this is different.
Yeah, like this really wasn't like a studio, I think, trying to chase after that trend. Like in a way, Hellblade was one of those games that kind of started it. Like, again, the studio who made Hellblade, didn't they do DMC Devil May Cry?
Yeah.
So I mean, that is definitely a jump, going from DMC to Hellblade.
Definitely. And the DMC they did, though, was it DMC? Anyway, the one they did was really good, though, but it was definitely a jump, for sure.
Oh, I think you just anger the Devil May Cry fans with that comment.
They're all good. They're all good.
And as the industry has been growing, and we've been seeing, at least in a lot of cases, and I think to Chris's comment, that kind of a snobbery about, oh, your game is just about running around and shooting. And in the post I'm writing, I also equate this to kind of the push of wholesome games. This idea that a video game, that if it's not like this, then it's not good, or how dare you play a game, or even again, like with the idea of violent games, like a violent game is somehow inferior to a game that is PG-13 or E for everyone. And again, not everyone thinks like this, but when we saw this kind of push towards wholesome, but this push towards the Hollywood prestige, that there's this idea or this opinion that this is a video game, or this is the game that everyone must play. And in a very, again, like as per 2022 rules, we have to bring in Elden Ring. This is one of the reasons why Elden Ring kind of short-circuited a lot of people. This idea that this game that is just about you wandering around and, very few, story interactions, very few kind of, AAA game stuff. And it turned out to be one of the best-selling games of 2022.
Yeah, again, devs at studios were baffled that there wasn't pathways to follow and quest markers and cutscenes to explain everything to you, that you actually had to read things and figure things out. And it was your own way, in that gamers enjoy discovering things on their own, right? It's definitely something that was a shock to many devs, especially quest designers and stuff. Peppa Pig and Cyberpunk, yeah.
Yep, and it drove, I think, a lot of people just to kind of question what is going on. Like, why is this game doing so well? And like we've said, and as you said earlier, that at the end of the day, a video game is meant to be played. It is meant to be an interactive experience.
Right.
And what we oftentimes see for games that kind of chase this prestige is that they're not really interactive. There's this idea that, no, you can't do this because we want you to experience it like this.
This
you
way.
Can't skip a cutscene because then you're going to miss the story. like as a very funny aside, that Asta Libra game that I play that just never wanted to end, it literally starts with a 15-minute long cutscene to get the story going, which you can skip. And the game even pops up saying, "Are you sure you want to skip this? Because this is a lot of our story right here." But at least they allow you to skip it.
We put a lot of work into this. Please don't skip it.
Skip.
Skip. Yeah,
But
man.
But as we've said, a major aspect of video games and of gameplay is the UI UX.
Mm-hmm.
If the UX of your game is poor, like we've seen, it causes massive churn.
Yeah, so this is where, like, okay, so I was playing because you said, okay, Somerville, I think was the one that really got this poking around in your brain, right? So I went ahead, I picked it up, played it a little bit, and really neat, right? They're really trying to tell a story, something very unique. But then all of a sudden, when I don't know what to do because they're removing things from the UI because they're trying to keep it, I don't know, they're trying to break your immersion. My immersion is immediately broke when I don't know what to do in your game. When I'm like, can I mess with this? Can I do this? What am I even supposed to do? And I'm not saying hold my hand, but when the UI doesn't, like, there's no responsiveness to what I do or in things like that, no context sensitivity. Instead, when because you're trying to keep it so cinematic, that's very detrimental. And that's for sure, Josh. That's like my main thing right there that I didn't like at all about it. It's really, really nice, telling a good story. Really over the top. Like, they were doing the intro like a movie intro, right? Just like,
Yep.
just legit. Like, after a certain part happened, you went outside, more credits started rolling, and I was like, wow, okay, this is really a movie. They're really trying to go, chase this movie style, but at a detriment, right?
Yep. And what you just said about the interactivity or the UI, like, I got stuck in that very first house.
Were you stuck in the first house too?
Yeah. Because
okay, cool. I was
wasn't.
playing it, I was like, I bet you Josh got out of here quick.
It took me like good 5 to 10 minutes. And again, it's not just 5 to 10 minutes. It's 5 to 10 minutes of walking slowly through the house.
Yeah.
And the only reason I couldn't figure it out was because the camera was not registering that it was like properly opening up the door.
Yeah.
And that, again, like the second I got past that, I just thought to myself, yeah, like a lot of people are quitting right here.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's no reason to, like, you would have to sell me so hard, and like they're like, yeah, don't worry, just put up with this really bad UI, and you don't know what. I mean, you'd have to sell me so hard to keep going, because I in the house I was ready to give up. I was like, oh boy, like there's I have no idea what to do here. Nothing's responding correctly. It was neat. The story was very neat. But if you're not enjoying it, and if your concept is trying to prevent something, but it's then doing the opposite, you're totally failing, right? You're trying to be cinematic and over the top, but it's actually failing as a game, because they're two different mediums. And when you're trying to, you have a very interactive medium, right? And you're saying, okay, well, in movies, you just sit there and watch, and it's presented to you, but you're interacting with this. And so when you have this juxtaposition between the two, and you don't know how to you're like, well, we're going to take out the gamification part of it. It's still a game. So you have to have those game aspects in there regardless. So.
Yep. And another really good example of where kind of the playability fell apart in Somerville was a section that occurred, I want to say like 30 minutes in. There's this part where you have to cross a lake, and there's like this giant like laser sweeping across it, so you're supposed to use this boat. So the problem is that the laser's coming, so your first indication is, well, maybe I have to run away and wait for the laser to disappear. No, if you do that, the laser never goes away. If you stand there, of course the laser comes and smacks you. What you're supposed to do, and it's very like unintuitive, is you're supposed to rush forward, going into the path of the laser to get to this boat that you just pulled, and then you're supposed to like kind of like maneuver the boat as you're crossing the pond. But again, it's that situation of, if you don't do that, you are effectively soft locked. and the dog that's like supposed to
Your
be
dog, yeah.
following you runs away. So you're thinking, well, I'm supposed to follow the dog and do
Oh, the
something.
dog, yeah, because at the beginning, the
Hmm.
dog is trying. He leads
Yep.
you in some spots, so you're like, okay. So then you're already believing you're supposed. I'm glad I didn't get to that part because with the way the game controls,
Hmm.
I would have totally lost it at that laser part.
Yep. And again, now that I was stuck for like 15 minutes. And this is
Wow.
something that, again, like when we talk about issues like this is basic playability. Like, this is something that, any playtester, even worth, half their weight, would have
Yeah,
said, yeah, like, what happens if they go backwards? Yeah, we gotta
we
get
gotta get
good.
good. Yeah.
Hmm. And again, it's one. This is the other point about like kind of this prestige games, and something I'm going to be writing about as well. I question the playtesting in two regards. Did the game get playtested? And if it did get playtested, did they ignore those concerns in favor of the art?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is the only way because in that one part, in the part in the house where you're supposed to, you have to grab like a dresser and move it over so you can escape. Well, you can grab it. The character doesn't contextually like he'll put up his hands and do stuff, but you actually have to like put it to the side or whatever.
Yes.
So you're just left there confused and not sure what to do.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's like all you just need to have context and responsiveness and know what you're like. The amount of quality that they have put into the cinematics, there's no reason that those issues should even exist. Like at a programmatic level, the animation in the game is over the top. It's really good. So there's no reason that the interactivity couldn't be worked within the animation. So that wasn't a problem. So to me, I'm laying it upon that it was play tested because it didn't seem very buggy, right? But it did seem like it was play tested but left out because that's how we want the art of the game to be perceived. We don't want to have button prompts, although there were button prompts every now and then, right? But they're just
Hmm.
kind of there. Like it seemed like almost that was a bug. Like they like one dev tried the dev was trying to force them in there and he only every now and then or something. But you would see a button prompt. So I was like, okay, A is the one I'm supposed to interact with. And so you're there pressing your interact button and it's not working and nothing's responding you or telling you anything. And again, like this shouldn't have failed in any way other than it was accepted.
Yep. And what you just said about having to manipulate, like, it's not just you hit the button to interact. You have to,
Right.
like, physically, like, move the thing exactly. There's no reason for something like that. Like, just have him hit the button, take it over.
It's it. Yeah.
But again, the point was, we have to make it, interactable or immersive. And when it comes at the cost of playability, these are things that quickly add up. Because how
It's
many.
funny because they try to make it immersive, but it's actually the opposite. It
Mhm.
actually throws me out as soon as possible when I'm because I as a programmer I know what's like as a game developer designer I know okay what's happening or whatever and I can see that, but I'm like why didn't you just like you said you press the button and you do the thing because it's not necessary for the interactivity or for it to look realism at the cost of playability, right, at the cost of it actually being a game because if not I would rather just watch a movie or
Yep, and again, that's the other aspect of this, is that it feels like for a lot of these games that they're just like extended movies. And that is very frustrating, again, from a playability standpoint. And some people, I think, will argue, and this is something I'm going to write about or discuss further, that I think some people will argue, well, who cares? They're trying to have a specific vision, they're trying to do something special. But again, the proof is kind of in the pudding. When I looked up Somerville on Steam, it has gone down to mixed reviews.
wow
And again, achievement rates for a game so new, they're not going to be as accurate if we look at this game in a year from now. But
yeah
looking at the Steam page or the achievement page for Somerville, where the game goes right now is they've lost basically about half the player base within 30 minutes of playing the game. So half the people who bought it and played completely checked out within 30 minutes to an hour. And that is not good. Like, I don't care how, prestigious you want your game to be. I don't care how many people who bought your game. Because some developers, I think, will argue, well, if it sold 100,000 copies, who the hell cares if they stop playing within an hour? But again, how many of those people who quit?
Second game, yeah.
How many of those people are going to come back for another game from that studio?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be like, okay, who's? I don't remember the studio, but the studio. I'm gonna be like their next game. I'm gonna be like, oh, probably they're gonna have problems with UI and context sensitivity. Like, if like you usually know that we've talked about this before. That common like an error like this with like context sensitivity and UI is something that might follow again in their next game, right? And if not, that's going to be in my head. So whatever chances I had of playing their next game are now diminished greatly just due to that fact, right? And it's something that it shouldn't even be an issue. Like, you could totally have the same experience without the context sensitivity and UI instead, right?
Yep. And like we've said, when immersion gets in the way of playability, that's when we have these clashes between kind of the art or the experience and the playability and the UX.
Yeah.
And who just brought that up? Thomas brought up Scorn, and that is arguably another really good example. With Scorn, it is a game that I would say legitimately got better as we got further into it. But that intro is kind of like point to point how not to design an introduction to your game in terms of puzzle design, in terms of layout. And again, it's not just me saying that. When we go to the achievement page for beating the first area, 33.5% actually did that. So it lost about, was at 69% of the player base before they even cleared Chapter 1. And
Wild.
This is kind of that issue, although this achievement page is just very sus, because it's showing like everything out of order. But I do know that number 1 is for that challenge. And it shows...
I wonder if they ever asked their playtesters, so if I wasn't paying you, would you play this game?
Yeah. And again, there is this issue when you're trying to get someone motivated to play your game, and it starts off with so many issues. And again, there's this tendency, I think, from a lot of developers to say, well, who cares? This is what I want to tell. I don't care if you can't solve it. I don't care if you can't figure this out. This is what I want to do. And this is a point I'm bringing up in the post, I'll mention it here, that at the end of the day, if you put a price tag on a game, then you are inherently selling a product. And if you're trying to sell a product, you need to remove these, rough edges from your game or find a way to mitigate them.
You like selling bath soap and be like, oh, I don't care that at least black ink on you or brown smudges and it doesn't work. It's like it's a game. It's a game. So yeah, definitely.
And it's to Tom's comment about Red Dead Redemption 2. I haven't played that one yet, but it's also why developers who are smart about this, they may put in UX elements or quality of life features like animation skip. Increase the speed. Here's a very popular one in strategy games. Increase or speed up battle animations or turn them off.
Yep.
I mean, how many of you have played a game like an XCOM or an Advanced Wars, where at some point you're just like, I don't want to see the same animation for the 500th time. Just do this. This guy takes 5, you take 3. Let's keep this thing going.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely quality of life stuff there for sure. Yeah, I mean, you can do that for dialogue, battle animations. For example, in Somerville, like
Hmm.
when he starts doing the thing, if you'd actually just like Pony was saying, pressing and holding the button, and if you just did it, and or you could just press it and do the animation immediately and do the thing instead of the whole convoluted way, right? Like you could just immediately execute it, skip the animation,
Hmm.
skip it. And so yeah, definitely for sure.
And here's the other sign that we're talking about a prestige game. That I saw people reviewing or talking about Somerville, and the thing that I saw a lot was people saying, it's a great game when you don't do any puzzles. So when you don't do any gameplay is when the game is good. So
Yeah, well, at
it's
least the other part's good. That's
hmm And another game that I brought up in my post I'm writing is, of course, Death Stranding. And I think when we talk about kind of like peak prestige and like Hollywood games, like
oh
Hideo
yeah,
Kojima is definitely the poster child for that with his titles.
yeah, definitely he is. He does big extravagant reveals, Hollywood actors. I mean, yeah, he goes all. I mean, he is basic. I guess like he like Metal Gear Solid One. He started like the cinematic basically almost then, right
Oh
around
yes,
there. I mean, so when we're talking about influential games in that respect, that's one of the big ones in that regard for sure. And cinematics.
oh yes. I mean, like Death Stranding, as people say, it's peak Hideo Kojima. Like it's the epitome of his style. It's a game
Yeah.
where when you're walking around, if the music plays, you get the actual song and the album that it's from.
Wow, dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Hey, Kojima, nice cutscenes with some gameplay in between.
Mm-hmm. Like there's a 45-minute to an hour long cutscene just
Cutscene.
because.
Just because about stuff you won't understand at all.
And again, it's a title where a lot of people say, it's the best game I played 15 hours in. So it's kind of like you hear that caveat right there. And
Yeah.
again, like for a lot of these games that kind of go for this immersion or this artistic approach, typically once you get past the churn point, people will generally stay. Because one, I think they become so invested in the game,
Yeah. Yeah.
and two, they kind of get to the point where it's like, oh, I get what they're going for, so now I want to see it go. And again, Scorn is a clear example of this. Like, once we got to past that huge turn point, it's still like it didn't lose too many more players past that. And we could argue, of course, that, these are the true fans. These are the people who are going to be part of that echo chamber, screaming that Death Stranding is the greatest game, or Somerville's is emotionally gripping title. But again, how many people did they lose in the pursuit of that?
Mhm. And sure, it could be a really great, emotionally gripping game. Somerville, I
Mm-hmm.
definitely was getting that vibe, but it sure didn't play that great, right? It sure didn't play. It would definitely like as a narrative piece, it really has that going on, but as gameplay wise, not so much, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're playing. We're playing games, and when you're experience pieces, art pieces, I don't think I have the most positive thing on them. Again, like who said it earlier? The story is expected. It doesn't have to be there, but the gameplay and all that has to be for sure. I mean, that's what
Mm-hmm.
keeps you there. That's what keeps you there. And even the best story in the world, if I'm going and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this dressing room, I'm supposed to push or pull or whatever, and you just that's it, and you give up. And no matter what the story was, I'm not going to stick around for it. So
Mm-hmm. And in my review of Death Stranding, I talk about how there's so many of my issues with that game were from the UI UX. Like I'm it's not even about the gameplay itself, not even about the story. It's just why are these menus so confusing to go through? Why is the game just like handicapping me for the first 10 hours? And
Jeez.
these
So,
are,
as someone who has no time at all to play games, should I give that a go?
yeah, go for it. You can speed run it, I'm sure, and like, well, if you skip all the cutscenes, I'm sure you can speed run that in like, you know, 2 hours maybe.
Okay, good, good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. When agencies of games have, yeah, but again, the player is the one experiencing the game,
Yeah, yeah,
and this is the point that I talk about when we discuss player churn and UX. That if the player finds the experience bad or they're just not liking it, nothing else matters. No amount of story is going to fix a no amount of story is going to fix a bad UI. No amount of, having professional voice actors and voice actresses is going to get somebody past a pain point. They're just going to basically go, I'm out. Like, why? Again, like a common point that seems to be coming up in some of my dev chats and some of our discussions here is respecting the player's time.
yeah,
If the
number
player
one.
feels like they're wasting their time, why should they keep playing your game?
Yeah, definitely. And like we're like past the point. If we're talking about the errors in game dev, we're past the point where like wasting a player's time is cool or was okay or a thing to do. And now no player wants they feel that pad. They know that pad's there. They know that these are just regurgitated quests. They know that everything this was procedurally generated with no thought just to waste your time because they had no other gameplay for you in different respects, right? And so they feel disrespected. And that's the main thing is that always when you're playing the game, don't think like when you're creating the game, it shouldn't be like, okay, this is my baby, this is my art piece, this is how you should experience it. We talk about playtesting, seeing what people think about it, how they feel about it, and then you change it accordingly. So like it's an experience for people to experience and enjoy, and it's not something that you say experience like this because that's not always the best thing. Like one of the coolest things, like for example, Dark Souls is everybody had like kind of a different story about how they went through and experienced the game, right? There was no story for they read, oh well, I happened to read this description on this weapon and I read this, so I found out this and that, and piecing together your own story instead of being forced to see it your own way and not experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. And it's oftentimes, I think, why, like, to what you just said about, like, Elden Ring and Souls Likes, why a lot of these prestige games tend to fall flat for me is that they just feel very railroaded. That you're not really in control of the game. There's not that sense of malleability or, customization. And it could be why I've grown so much to playing roguelike and roguelite style games is that it is about that individual experience of what happens on
Yes.
this run to what happens on this next run, and it
Yeah.
it kind of drives like counterproductive to what we see from a AAA or from a prestige game.
Right. And like, okay, and just for example, would you want to watch the same episode of a TV show over and over again? No, you'd want to watch different one or a second one or something different. And so that's why you're talking about your like with roguelikes, because it's a different experience, something different every time. And that ability when you really lock it down with a narrative and you only have like one experience, that kind of really does lock it down. And in the other way would be, roguelikes are different where
Mm-hmm.
everybody comes away with a different experience. And I think that is definitely something to aim for sure. I think I'd appreciate that a lot more than a QTE force narrative driven event with poor UI for sure.
Mm-hmm. And to Pony's comment, yeah, that should someone make that video game right there. Wisdom Stranding.
That was in Stranding.
Yep. And it's why I think we've seen, like, from the AAA side, that more developers haven't really been, like, approaching roguelikes. We could argue something like Deathloop. And, like, Deathloop, I think, would definitely not be a prestige game. Like, it feels very raw, I guess, in a
Yeah,
way.
very raw, super raw.
can uninstall roguelikes in all kinds of different
All,
ways.
all yeah, they install in a bunch of different ways for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Delete, recycle, use a batch file,
Throw your computer out the
throw your computer out
window.
the window. Only just the hard drive only if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Keep
Yep, and like to Chris's point about like that dynamicness, that when we
yeah,
look at these games that tend to give you more options, and this is inherently that push and pull, that the more random or replayable a game is, the less control you can really have over
yeah,
that experience.
yeah.
And I think the only game that has managed to do it really well of having its cake and eat it too would be Hades. That it
Perfect.
has a full-on story that works so well with its format, with the fact that it is a replayable game. And again,
And
I
it's so simple. Like it's so simple because the way they do it, you just have a really long story, right?
Mhm.
That unlocks, and it's just after a few times, after you've gotten this far in the game, unlock this dialogue. After you've done this, unlock this part, and it's just unlocking the story. So the story's constantly evolving, but it seems so complex and so well put. I mean, just a masterpiece at that at getting making it seem that the narrative is truly the narrative that you're experiencing, even though
Mhm.
it's random, right? But it is the narrative of the game, and they got it perfect. I mean, super talented team there, yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of like the key, right? Is like if you're going to have random elements in there, have a narrative or something that not static, but that can be dynamically adjusted dialogue, right? Dynamic dialogue, dynamic events, dynamic AIs that's contextual to what's happening, and that's how Hades pulled it off, and it seems like magic. Like it just seems amazing.
Mhm.
Hades, marry me.
And again, like a game like Hades is a good example of one where kind of the gameplay is front and center for the story. Whereas for a lot of games that we've played, or a lot of the prestige style games, the story is oftentimes taking over away from that gameplay. And why they
Or
kind of
no gameplay at
suffer.
all.
Yep. And again, what we see from games that succeed in all fronts is making full use of the medium. And this is a point that was brought up several times in the chat. That if you're making a video game needs to be interactable. And if you remove that interactivity, you just have a movie.
Yeah,
And a lot of these games, they just again, a lot of games feel better to watch than they are to play.
yeah.
And when we have our discussion about kind of YouTuber and the streamer side impacting things, that's probably come up a few times in it.
Definitely, yeah. The thing about a game being better to watch than play, right? This is definitely something to talk about for sure.
Hmm.
Dark Pictures analogy.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about that other one. Not the Bloober team. Is it Until Dawn? No, not Until Dawn. Wait, could have been that one. The one that's from that studio that like they get like motion capture like all the actors. Yeah, it is Until Dawn. Let me
Until
see.
Dawn, yes.
Uh,
Is it a
where?
horror game?
Yeah,
Yeah, that one
super
rules.
massive games. Like
Super massive games.
yeah, like that. I think would be another good example of that kind of like prestige where we're trying to be all serious or trying to make this point about horror, and we
Hmm.
not only have voice actors, we not only do we hire celebrities, we completely mocap them and get their exact face into their
Yeah,
games.
I was surprised how much I liked it. I think I tried to get the different endings. The waifu loved it, so it definitely captured a giant audience and a good market.
Hmm. I've watched people play it, and it just does not interest me because it
Yeah,
feels like you're basically
it's a
playing a choose your own adventure horror.
it's a walking simulator, choose your own adventure, like with like two puzzles and like
Hmm.
QT times in your die. But it's short, so that's what it is. It's like it's really short. I think The completion time was like 2 4. I could be wrong, maybe,
Hmm.
but it was short enough where it wasn't that bad. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend. Hey, go play it. It's worth if you can watch it. It's a movie, like literally, it's just a choose your own adventure, like you said, to watch. But
Hmm.
it's the one of the best ones ever done, like that's ever been done yet so far.
And with kind of a lot of the more prestige style games, again, it feels like they're trying to run away from the game
The
or
game, yeah,
the gaminess. And
yeah,
I was reading some comments about Dark Tide as we were starting, and like Dark Tide again is a good example of a game that is a game. It has the whole RPG, your gear. I want my +3 gun or my +7 bolter, and it's hard, I think, for some people when it comes to, I guess, trying to square that circle of, the gaminess of a title. And one of the examples I like to go back to, of course, is the Tomb Raider reboot that happened in the 2010s. And people know by now, I've gone on the record that I just did not like that trilogy. I've only played 2 of the 3, but I think it's a really good example of kind of that AAA chase towards prestige. That,
yeah,
Lara Croft has to be grounded. It has to be, she has to have like her emotional moments. But it came at the expense of that kind of gameplay.
yeah. It didn't. The first one was the probably the best outing,
Yeah.
and then and then it just really fell off the cliff of the like second and third. Got a third was a third, but yeah, just okay, basically following like a Hollywood movie script. That she has to come to grip with, oh, she's killing people, and she has to come to grip with this, and this moment has to happen with someone else, and it just very cliche things that happen in a movie, right? Like you go to see
Mm-hmm.
an action movie, that's exactly what it's going to happen. And again, we're not going to see a movie. We're coming to play Tomb Raider. We're coming to play a game. We want to raid some tombs. So, yeah, we don't want her to go through her. It was there, and it's fine. But yeah, I can see it doesn't really work with the whole thing, because by this point anyway in the story, she was already past that, like where
Yeah.
she would be emotionally. So
I have not seen the movie The Descent. I've heard about it, but I think it's one that I miss. I was thinking
Descent.
of what was that one in the French tunnels? As above, so below. I remember
Hello.
that one. We've got to be careful. Just get on horror movies. Yep, and thank you, Thomas. I was just about to bring that up. This is where
Yes.
this is where every game developer's
Yeah.
favorite term comes up. Ludonarrative dissonance. If you want
Yeah,
to
man.
cause a game developer to have chest pains and give them a headache, just say that word 3 times. But yeah, like this is where we see that clash between kind of trying to make a game and trying to make this, inspiring, emotional movie or story. And yeah, like
Yeah.
Tomb Raider, like it's that issue of she breaks down emotional because she can't kill anyone and all that. Well, for the last 5 hours, I've been sniping animals and humans with bow and arrows. I did that using the climbing hook to like disembowel someone. Like at some point, it's
Yeah.
like, really, you're still trying to make her feel like emotionally soft with this.
It's like, I thought she was already a killing machine by this point. I
Mm-hmm.
don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Most JRPGs.
And like with Uncharted, it's that same issue
Yeah,
when
man.
you were telling me Nathan Drake is an archaeologist. We're supposed to go on this fun and exciting, Indiana Jones
Treasure
adventure.
hunt. Yeah.
But then we spend a level or two just like literally gunning down like dozens and dozens of people. Like Nathan Drake probably has like a higher body count than some
For
FPS
real.
heroes.
For real, like cities and towns and
Mhm.
trains, and like this dude just messed up everything in search of treasure. I actually don't remember if we found the treasure or not. If we did, I don't know. I don't know.
I want to say I played 2 of the Uncharted. I didn't play 3, or we're up to 4 or whatever.
Right. The line between treasure hunter and serial killer is so thin.
I think Agent 47 from Hitman has like a less kill count than
Yeah,
Nathan Drake.
right. He's way weird. He's way more chill than Nathan Drake.
And actually, bring up Hitman actually is another really good point. I think it goes with what Thomas said earlier, that Dark Tide doesn't have a single drop of pretension and knows what it is and embraces it. And Hitman is another really good example. I owe everyone another play of the trilogy of it. But
Yes.
like
Let's see you play it right correctly. So let me see you play it correctly.
Yeah.
Not me.
Like, the Hitman games have always had that sense that the developers know what they want the game to be. They know this is not a high-class art piece. They know this is a game about a guy who can dress up in a clown suit who can then go and commit a assassination during a birthday party. Or, I think a term that gets thrown around a lot is kind of like, sandbox stealth kind of game. And again, like, it goes to something we were saying about roguelikes, that it becomes this sense of your experience. How did you play Hitman? How did you beat this level? Well, I did it like this, but I did it like that. Which way is right? Who cares? If I want to run around throwing frying pans at people, and you want to do, Mission Impossible, I get in and no one ever knows I'm here. As long as we both get, mission complete at the end, who's to say?
Yeah, you create, it's excellent level design. You create excellent AI, right, that responds accordingly, and make it a sandbox and give the player multiple ways. The devs were adamant, right? We want them to approach it from any way possible, right? There's multiple ways that they could solve this, and that's how it should be, because imagine how Hitman would play if there was only one way, right? It would be so bad. And it's like, nope, that's the only way you could do it. But instead, there's a million ways to do it. Frying pan, fire extinguisher, go this way, go under, put on this security guard outfit, put on this. There's so many ways to solve it. And that gives a lot to the player, right? I was able to figure it out on my own accord, and beat the challenge. And I still killed less people than Nathan Drake.
There you go. There's your accomplishment right there. Let's see. Yeah, my friend Pedro. And yeah, like, the idea that the developer knows the game they're trying to make, excuse me, is a really good point. Something that I say a lot about a lot of indie games that I really enjoy, that it feels like the developer knows exactly what kind of game they want to make. They know what the intended audience is, and they make that game for it. And again, not every game can get that perfect divination of, I know exactly who's going to play it. But when you think about your audience, when you think about what they want to do, and again, this is what we say about kind of this opposite of these kinds of games, to the Prestige, that when you think about what the audience is, what they're coming with their expectations, and not what you just want to do, this leads to games that are oftentimes stronger in terms of playability, in terms of onboarding.
Yeah, definitely. And we've always said this first, like, know who your market is, know who you're making your game for. And always, one of the biggest cardinal sins is if you're just making it for yourself and you're forcing it down other people's throat. Because only a few people will accept it, right? And if you want everybody to like the game, you should know who your audience is and what the market is and who you're going for.
Mm-hmm. And yes, I had to look it up quick because I forgot until the end in terms of the title, but the second I saw that thumbnail, all the pain came back to me of playing that game. And yeah, like this, I'm not sure if this is directly related to Prestige games, but it's definitely an attitude that we see from a lot of indie developers. That idea that, I am always right. It is my baby. You have to do it my way or the highway. But like you said a few minutes ago, we don't live in a world anymore where we get 1 to 2 games a month. I wish I could only had to play 1 to 2 games a month.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. It would be very relaxing instead of playing like 30 to 40 games a month. And
Yeah.
yes, I loved Invisible Ink, and I wish they did more with that design. But
Invisible Ink. I haven't heard of that one.
oh, that's a really good one from Clay, who did Don't
Okay.
Starve, Auction
Oh
Monopoly.
wow. Okay. Check that one out.
hmm And yet, like, this idea that someone needs to suffer through your game, that you
Yeah.
had to make it intentionally frustrating or cumbersome because that's how you get people, invested in it, it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
again, when we talk about stuff like this, the proof is in the achievement rates. It's not in the actual how much the game sold. It's not in how many critics gave it a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Look at how fast you go from 100 to 43 to 10 to even sometimes 2. Because when you see a game drop that quickly, something is not working. And if you don't learn those lessons, you're going to repeat them.
Yeah, definitely. And so we've talked about this before. Like, so I would expect either that for Somerville that they look at they actually look at the retention and say, okay, well, what's going on here? Clearly the UI is not working. So patch in the UI, do something right, do something to the context, do a patch. Or on your next one, definitely learn from it, right? On the next game, they have to learn from it. And that's the one reason why, because if the churn rate is that bad, there's, right? Definitely a massive issue. And I felt the issue within seconds, right, of playing the game. After the first cinematic, and I was instantly stuck. I was not immersed stuck. I was out, I was out of the game, so.
Mm-hmm. And with something like with Pendment, only 25% of the people who played it, my voice is dying, but 25% of the people who played the game actually made it past the first chapter. And we played it for about like 45 minutes to an hour on stream. I didn't even get past that first chapter of the game. It was just still going on with more dialogue. And again, people will argue, well, then you weren't a fan of that game, or, you're not a true fan. But if you don't look, and again, when I do my video on pacing in games, and we talk, I'm sure, more about pacing in future episodes, this is going to come up a lot in terms of how developers really can just take their game out by the kneecaps if they don't think about what is it like to play this game? What does the first hour of my game look like? Because again, if I'm quitting an hour, 20 minutes into your game, and you're telling me that this is like this amazing story and it's going to grip you at the 50-hour mark, how many people are going to get that far? And I think to pony someone from earlier, how many people are just going to say, you know what? It's emotional. I'll just watch the ending on YouTube.
I'll just watch the ending.
Who cares?
Yeah, that's right. I'll just watch it. No worries. I don't have to experience the pain of 50 hours to do it. And again, we're not there anymore. Like you were saying, there's not 2 games coming out a month. It's not that chill anymore. There's how many games coming out a month now, Josh?
Ooh,
Well, quadrillions. There's quadrillions a month coming out, and so it's like the amount of time that someone gets to invest in your game is limited, and so thus you must always respect the player's time. And again, and to go back to Somerville, I'm not knocking on it. I don't want to knock on it on the devs. I think everything they have achieved was brilliant that I've seen so far. The storytelling, but again, the UI and that simple failing of it, right? That otherwise, I think you'd be looking at a much better game. But that is literally kneecapped just by a simple like context sensitive UI issue or interactivity issue. You know what I mean? So.
And to the point of the game Immortality, did you play Immortality yet?
No, I have not.
Okay, this is the latest game from the guy behind Her Story. I interviewed him, I think, a long time ago. This was like right around the time Her Story first came out.
Oh, when it first came out, yeah.
And in this case, with Immortality, I played it for a sum total of 35 seconds. And I just got incredibly annoyed by the controls. It just really wasn't fitting. I just said, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. Like, again, I didn't get a press key for it, so I was just playing it on Games Pass. So I even have, the hook that I'm, on it to professionally review it, and I just stopped playing it. And this is that point about how a lot of people, I mean, it's got a Game of the Year nom right now. Like, I know people are voting for it. I'm sure a lot of critics are calling it the best damn game of all time. It's a game everyone needs to play. And then I look on Steam.
When is that the awards happening?
I want to say in December.
Okay, we need to have like an emergency podcast or something before it happens and just discuss. I don't know. I'm a little. I'd almost say like appalled at looking at the award, the Game of the Awards. No one's saying it was like prestigious or whatever, but a little bit sus. It's a little sus to me.
Oh yeah, we can. Oh yeah, I think we need to do that because we can We'll rant for as long as the award show is probably.
Yeah. We'll do a live reaction to it. Let's do that.
And
we can. Pony's saying restream it. We'll react to it.
Oh, let's get Jeff Keighley or Jeff and I. Let's get him on for our discussion too. He'll love to join it.
Yeah, Jeff Keighley will join in for sure.
He'll live stream us live streaming the award show, and there we go. Yeah, and like with Immortality, it's a game that it surprisingly has less churn than I expected. But its big churn point, they lost 47% of the player base on Steam. So again, you can argue, well, it's only 47%. 53 really got past, and that arguably for a game as niche as this can be good.
Yeah.
On the flip side, we could say, well, 47% of the people who bought your game just checked out immediately. What can you do to improve that? And this is a point that I could rant for the next 5 hours on about developers who make the same mistakes from game to game, or they're not growing from game to game.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm big on this. I'm really big on this, that every game that you're making should be leading toward your next game. Like, and I'm talking about like code base. I'm talking about experiences, connections, developing, just all because many times we've said this before, that video game development is just multidisciplinary. There's so many disciplines involved, so many things that you have to understand. And so, like, maybe you didn't get the marketing right on the first one. Well, let's work a little better on the second one. Maybe you didn't understand your market, your audience, or maybe you didn't understand platforming, whatever the game was. Get better at it. The jumping wasn't good. I'm going to make a second one. Well, let's figure out what's wrong with it. Also, side note, have some type of way to, because we're talking about these churn rates, right? A lot of games use, some type of heat map or some type of way to tell where the player is getting stuck, where they're getting frustrated, because they're not going to go, right? We're going to guarantee that those 47 people are not going to go on a forum and say, this is where I stopped playing. This is exactly why this switch drove me mad. And they're going to be like, okay, cool. So there needs to be some way for you to extract data out of the game to know where the players are stopping, what they're doing. So heat maps, something like that, some type of analytics to analyze it. And even for small indie devs, this is possible. These things do exist. So do that for sure, and that might help, because I think something like in Somerville, that would be, if they had that would be invaluable, like priceless. If they could say, oh, they're having trouble with this drawer. That's the main reason why they're leaving. Let's fix that, and then boom, all of a sudden your retention rate goes up 20%, right? Like, so something like that, definitely recommend.
And again, achievements are a very quick and dirty solution to this. You have achievements for, get through chapter 1, get through chapter... It sounds, again, like for a lot of people, it sounds like, you're besmirching the honor of your game, or it sounds like it's going to just cheapen it. But again, this is a very easy way to determine, well, if I just lost 60% of my player base going from chapter 3 to chapter 4, what the heck happened between those two chapters.
Exactly. Some type of for sure, and that is definitely even like that's like one of the low budget ways to do it too with achievements, right? With Steam, it's there in Steam, it's in the API, and so you can. That's like even one of the smallest ways to like extract data from it, you know. And then, like I always said before, have you know, when you're doing the alphas or the demos or whatever, always have a link where you can do. They can click and go to your Discord or to a survey if they're playtesting it for you. Also write that, and then hey, maybe also ask your playtesters, do you like this game if I wasn't paying you? Because I feel like some of these, like, you know, like for Somerville, how it was just passed for the art
Mm-hmm.
thing, that if it was like, okay, what's going on, would you really play this, you know? I think a lot of the times that, you know, you're going to get different responses from different people, and so you need to analyze that.
Mm-hmm. And
Usually the Samurai Pig EA win. Oh,
are you telling me, Chris, I need to send my application a little bit earlier to become the influencer of the year? And again, this is why playtesting is such a key aspect. And why a lot of the games that don't do it or they don't listen to it tend to end up with issues. And like you said, you should always be thinking about what's going to be in your next game.
yeah,
How do you improve? Because you
yeah.
never want to go backwards. And it's also why we sometimes say that if your first game is that breakout hit, that can sometimes be worse for you. Because what
Yeah.
did you learn from your first game if all of a sudden it sold 300,000 copies or a million copies?
It's nothing. You learn nothing.
And then you think to yourself, well, then, surely my second game, I could make another million copies off of that.
Easy. Yeah. Just real quick, I just want to go back to that each game, and I am talking like at like every level, from a code level, like down. Like you should be thinking how everything's going to be moving forward to your next game, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, like you said, you might end up in a situation where this one game blows up and you have no idea what to do forward. There was no plan forward. You weren't working with your systems to move forward. No idea about scalability, onboarding other people. All
Mm-hmm.
these things do need to be. We're getting off topic here, but
Yeah.
definitely, yeah,
And when you're in that position of trying to build like a game, when you're trying to tell a story, and I think this is that point that I think is a really good summation that if you are focused on story or art first, you still need to think about what is your game going to be about in terms of playing.
yeah.
A good example of kind of like missing that point, I think, would be like a Tale of Tales, the makers of The Path. They're very like they are like super high on the art side of things, and sometimes they release a game that's literally like a 40-second game, like it's just trying to tell you a little story and then that's it. And they're definitely an example of a studio that kind of says, we're doing it our way. You don't like it, there's the door. And again, you will attract a fan base. There is a fan for literally every type of game imaginable.
Yeah.
But how do you build a sustainable studio off of that? How do you say, well, if only 40 people in the world really like my games, how do I run a company off of only getting 40 sales for each one of my titles?
Man, that's a puzzle to solve, isn't it? For
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah, you have to think of how can you expand your audience, because only selling 4 titles um probably isn't going to sustain your studio at all. So yeah, you definitely see how can you expand past that, because again, it's back to that this is my game and this is how it is, accept it as it is, and that's not really how it is anymore. Is
Mm-hmm.
that you're creating, again, you're putting a dollar amount on it. It's a product that you are selling to people, and it's not something that's supposed to inflict pain and suffering on them and waste their time. That's not what people are playing games for. As far as I'm aware of, that's not what people are playing games for anymore. We might have done it a little bit back in the day when there was only like 2 games a month to play. We're like, yeah, I'll play this sadistic, horrible game for a second, but not anymore. We have gazillions, I think, as Vince said, coming out every month. So our time is limited for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, when you're trying to chase, like we said at the start, there's a sense that a lot of developers are trying to chase that Oscar or Emmy gold their games. And at the end of the day, if your game is not enjoyable to play, or if it's not really keeping people invested, none of that story matters. I was thinking about the A Plague Tale series. Did you play either one of those?
Yeah, I played the first one, and then I see that is this the second one that's nominated for the game of the year? The Plague Tale is nominated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the game, or I'm looking at the achievements on Steam for the first game. I stopped at Chapter 5, which was 62.7% of the player base. So they lost about 40%. I'm trying to see where. So it looks like 42.7% actually cleared the game, which is actually pretty good.
That's pretty good.
And again, it was one of those games.
I was like level 1. I was out. Yeah, I didn't get very far in that one.
And I feel like when we talk about this, the reason for this chase of prestige is this idea of trying to make a game that everyone needs to play. And we hear this a lot about these games that kind of become Game of the Year winners, or the ones that the critics love to talk about. Oh, you need to play this one. You know, this is what a video game should be, and all that.
Yeah.
And they're typically some of like the worst examples when it comes to the actual interactivity or the agency on the player.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling, like what they're trying to actually produce or trying to actually achieve when you're just really like these games. Like I think it was Pony who said that, like literally these games feel like they're being created only for like a game of the year type. Like they're literally being curated to be nominated for those types of things somehow. And I don't know, it's weird to me. It doesn't seem right, but yeah. And again, they're usually some of the worst examples of gameplay or games as general, right? It's probably they're good examples as like a choose your own adventure kind of movie game things, but as like a game, they're usually some of the worst, right?
Yeah. And to Chris's comment, although there have been some indie games that have tried to go the prestige route. Yeah,
like with movies, like the independent movies, like those are just
the art house movies. Yeah, and again, like you can tell the problem is again that you can have a fantastic, amazing, completely out of this world story, but if it comes at the expense of your gameplay, people aren't going to want to play that. They'll watch, there are a lot of people who've just watched cutscenes of all these games on YouTube. And again, they may say, wow, that was really amazing and thought-provoking. And then you ask them, well, are you going to buy the next game? And they'll be like, no, why would I buy the next game?
Right, yeah. And anyway, I'm just going to watch it on YouTube again.
Yeah. And here's an interesting point. As we've said, the first game from any franchise, any studio, it comes with its own kind of bubble in terms of people's interest in it. If it's the first game, you don't have a benchmark to then say yay or nay to. So you just watch me suffer then.
Yeah, I just watch Josh suffer.
So, and going back to A Plague Tale, for instance, it's actually a really good point. The first Plague Tale, as of right now, it's sitting at 41,000 reviews on Steam. And again, it came out at this time 3 years ago. If we look at the second game, A Plague Tale Requiem, it came out just over a month ago. It's sitting at about a little over 3,000 reviews. Now, again, 3 years is different than 1 month. But for a game like this, we would usually see, I think, the bulk of its sales or the bulk of its reviews within, what would we say, like the first 30 to 60 days, give or take?
Yep. Yeah, 90 latest, but yeah, 60 days. I'd say 60 for sure. What?
And
Speaking of that, gone home. The ending of all the suspense and then womp womp. What did you think of the ending, Josh? Without spoilers.
hmm, I thought it was okay. The problem was, I think the ending was like spoiled by. I already heard about what the
Oh, you already
ending was
knew.
going
Oh,
into it, but it was
oh, you
like,
already pre-spoiled.
it was like
Yeah.
okay, like it was like
Okay.
it was again. It was one of those games where after I finished playing, I'm like, well, I never want to play this game again. Like I'm
Right.
done. Like I've seen what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Um, it was a ton of a suspense. It was amazing how. What's amazing is how much suspense they were able to build on that premise alone. To me, is amazing. They got that done really well.
Hmm.
Requiem. My wife and I were like, "Wow, really?
Hmm.
Yeah, go play. Go home. Go play it."
Hmm. And again, like there are people who will shout the praises of that game for its story, much like how a lot of people will shout the praises of Tomb Raider, God of War, and I'm trying to think of a few other recent examples. I've been there. And again, if you want to look at a game from a gameplay perspective, you actually have to play those games. And I had a lot of issues with God of War. And again, they're separate from the story, but they're still there. And I think again, we're about an hour and 15, so I think one of my final points is that a lot of people view prestige games as, you know, it's unfair to criticize them for the gameplay
Yeah.
because you're trying to tell the story. So who cares if the platforming doesn't work or there's 5 annoying stealth sequences? But again, at the end of the day, they're still games. They're still meant to be played. And if they're not enjoyable to be played, a lot of people don't care about the story. And I should be more specific. The consumer is not going to care about that game. You know, critics can praise a game all day long, but again, if a game has, critical rating of 95, consumer rating of 10, again, are all those critics going to finance your next game?
Probably not. Flat over the floor. So not a lot of God of War fans here, huh? No. And yeah, I guess I'm gonna say for my final point here is that I think that chasing art house or indie house like cred and ignoring what the foundation of gaming is, which is actually gaming, interactivity, gameplay itself, is probably not the right direction to go. If you do, right, like again, like as I was playing Somerville, I saw so many ways that that it could work perfectly, and all the complaints that I have and you have about it could easily be solved. They're not like hard issues to solve, right? Um, and so I think that if you are, there's no for one, there's no reason to ignore the gameplay, right? Like whatever it is, if you're making some interactive whatever, and the gameplay is platforming, but it's the worst for some reason the platforming is so bad in these type of games. I don't know why. Worse than regular platformers that are bad platformers. It's even worse. And it's like, just get some decent platforming in your game. Just have some context sensitivity. Just have some basic stuff like that. Those are the basic things that we're asking because it is a game, right?
Hmm.
And again, people are going to watch it on YouTube. People will return it. They're not going to buy your second one again. And so above all, remember that it is a game and people want to experience and interact with the game, and they don't want to be force fed and shown how to experience it. I guess I could just sum it up in that respect,
Yeah.
Josh.
Yep, and like you said, like platforming is a really good example. I guess that's a really good plug for when I pulled the influential games one coming up on this week.
That's right. That's right.
That you can like a lot of people have tried to do the emotional platformer, but the jumping just feels horrible. And
Talk
it's
about
Ludo narrative.
they're different. That's like that at all. Like a platformer, and then like some really deep emotional thing makes no sense to me.
Tell an emotional story about depression, but using Crash Bandicoot physics.
Dude, yeah, I don't get it.
Is Crash 4 on Steam yet? Did they actually finally do that? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, I think at some point I should. If we're talking about watching Josh suffer, I think that would be one of those games that I should play through. Yep, and I like Grease too. It was really good. And again, Grease I think had a solid gameplay. Oh, let's see. All right, Chris, have a good night. Have a good birthday
Happy
party
birthday.
with the wife. Play some play some Pokemon. Pokemon Dark Tide birthday party. There you go.
Inverse podcast, non-prestigious gamings and why.
Yeah, that could be a fun one.
For sure.
Yep. And even with a game like Grease, it was, I think, good for what it did. I felt like it kind of like, and that's another thing I see about a lot of prestige games that try to do something different, that it feels like when you get to the end of the game, is like the beginning of someone else's game, in terms of the mechanics. Like, it feels like, okay, we're all ready, we're going to do all this crazy stuff, game's over.
Game's over. Right. Or like the degrading. This is a side tangent. I don't know what we were talking about earlier, but I wanted to bring it up. Where the game gets worse as you keep playing. When we were talking about this, but yeah, like the idea that you just keep playing and like you start amazing and then you lose powers as you go on. That would kind of be like the antithesis of is it not good?
Mm-hmm. And even if your game starts out bad and gets better, that's not good either, because then you're just killing the churn rate.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse. I think I would guess that's worse, starting out underpowered and worse, and then starting out fully powered and, well, I don't know. They're both pretty bad, Josh. They're just inversely bad.
Maybe we talk about non-prestigious games. I will have to bring up Asta Libra again, because I think that is the king of it for right now. I guess one other quick point. When we talk about this idea of trying to push, I think, legitimacy and the prestige of games, it also is about trying to get away from, the gaminess or the actual game.
Getting away from what a video game is, actually. In some respect, it's like someone's trying to figure out, how do we make this not like a game anymore? And of course, there's no way to not do it. If they could, I don't know. But I don't think there is a way, because it's a game, right? And a video game requires inputs. Whether it's, even if it's wired up to your head or not, like, I mean, you're still going to be providing inputs and doing things like that. So it's still a game, right? And even if I was sitting there in a VR headset hooked up and then the cutscene was there, it'd be even more infuriating, right?
So here's a question for you and for the chat. To this point about trying to get away from the game. A common point that I hear from a lot of people who criticize Doom Eternal over Doom 2016 was this greater push towards a story. Yeah. If you remember Doom 2016, the whole story was Doom guy angry, Doom guy rip and tear. In Doom Eternal, it was now, this massive, like heavy metal prog rock epic of, everything has like a 5-page lore dump of, this is from so-and-so who long ago did this, and then they went over here, and they were trying to just over-explain everything. This is how the Doom guy got his shotgun. This is how the Doom guy got his chainsaw. And a lot of people felt that it was overcomplicating something that didn't need to be complicated. And I don't know, I'm of two minds about it. Again, I think this gets at this idea of a prestige kind of game, that it's not just a video game. It's not something that you just play for 68 hours, 8 to 10, but we need you to feel the emotion of this character.
Right.
We
This is
want
gonna
you to be
change your life. You're
we
going to
want you
walk
to
away with something.
be like emotionally invested in the Super Shotgun story, or this idea of trying to create this like epic franchise. And we could even again bring this back to the idea of the horror games and like how so many horror games have been trying to be the next Five Nights at Freddy's or the next Outlast, where it's not just about the game, it's about all the storytelling. And did Freddy wear a blue bow tie in this game, and how that links to some ARG, and how it's going to mean all this other stuff. And I just found I enjoyed Doom Eternal again for its gameplay. It's one of my favorites. But again, like the story just felt like okay, yeah, it's great that I now know a 5-page dissertation about how the super shotgun works. Did that really do anything? Did that really add to that game? And
And
again,
a side point is like all the time they spent developing that maybe could have spent elsewhere, the resources, right?
mm-hmm. Or as we're apparently finding out about giving Mick Gordon, proper due, because there's a
Dude, yeah.
whole lot
I
going
did
on
not know
there.
about Mick Gordon, my man, not getting.
Oh yeah, you should look that up after this. There's a whole
Okay,
lot
I
of
will.
news
Oh
breaking
boy.
right now.
Oh man. As a guitarist myself, I'm a. Oh no.
And again, like we look at something like Ultra Kill. Like Ultra Kill is basically Doom Eternal without any of that
Anything.
fluff.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
whole story is, robots need blood. There's no more blood on Earth. You go to hell, get blood. Like that's basically
Yeah.
the entire opening of Ultra Kill.
And then again, like one of the main things we say about games when you're playing is you need to get into the core gameplay loop as soon as possible, right? I mean, there's nothing worse than I start up a game and I don't get to play. I don't even know. I'm watching a story and they're trying to invest me in something, right? Like get invested in this, be invested in this, okay, okay, okay. And then I start playing and I can't do, and it's the worst game I've ever played, right? What does that do for me, right?
Uh,
I'm very
do you remember from Shadow of War? They press the sneak key to go kiss your wife. We had to try and get. We had to tie the stealth tutorial to he cares about his family by sneaking up on his wife.
Yes. Yeah, perfect, man.
And you're not going to be sneaking up to kiss the orcs in for the next 20 to 30 hours. Oh yeah, and don't forget, of course, about David Cage's game as
Heavy
well.
Rain,
If
yeah.
we're talking
What
about
was it?
prestige,
What was that? The balloon part?
I
Pony, help
did
me out here.
I did not play Heavy Rain. I had
You didn't play
enough
it?
of
Okay.
Fahrenheit or Indigo Prophecy.
Indigo props, yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Heavy Rain is it's definitely experience for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you didn't play it, Pony? Okay. It was just me then. I beat the entire game and I played it. I thought I bought into the hype that okay, this had to be experience. I gotta have experience, and I was like, okay, well I experienced it. Great.
Yep, did not play that one, and I think I dodged a
You're
bullet.
good. You're good. You dodged a bullet, man.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about kludgy like design and like difference between cutscenes and gameplay and just like mechanics that you only see one time that are so obscure. Yeah, it's right up your alley.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, again, when we look up games like Heavy Rain, I see like it's got 9s and 8s and even a 10 out of 10 from people saying it's like the best game ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, this is why I don't really pay attention to reviewers and other sites, because I don't really care about, how they experience. I want to know how the gameplay is.
Right,
And again,
exactly.
there's a difference between playing a game on the easiest setting or saying, oh, if you just skip every puzzle, then the game is great, versus actually playing that game. And again, this goes back to why playtesting is very important if you want your game to feel right and be something that consumers want to play.
Exactly. Well said, Josh.
I think there's any other final points. Heavy Rain was about that.
Firewatch?
I never played Firewatch.
Oh, you
Ever?
never played it? Oh man, it was pretty good game.
Hmm.
Pretty good. One of the better ones. Again, it kind of had the atmosphere was bigger than what the actual reveal was. What the actual thing was kind of like a Gone Home type
Mm-hmm.
deal. So when but yeah, if you ignore the parts that make this game for it, it's a 10 out of 10. I think that's a good sum up of that pony.
Yep. And I just remember my last point that it's one of the reasons why not only have I gravitated towards indie games, but why I enjoy, the games from Project Moon, Lobotomy Corporation, Library of Ruina, Limbus Company that's coming, I think, next year, that they are very much the opposite of prestige games. They put a lot into their games, but they make, they are so unique and original. Like, they are as far away from what would be considered a triple A, standard rote experience as any other game.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm a bigger fan of that myself personally. I mean, and like you're a massive champion of indie games just because of that respect, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's some of the best experiences that you can get in this realm, so
Yeah. And again, it's always about improving. It's about saying, what did we do wrong? And a lot of developers don't like to say that, especially when we're talking about like a prestige style game. Where did we fail? We couldn't have failed. Look at all these critical reviews, and our game got nominated from the Game of the Year awards. And again, we will have to do that Game of the Year's
we got
video,
to. We
which
have
will
to.
probably lead to both of us getting snubbed for future Game of the Year awards.
It's fine. It's fine. Remember, Samurai Pig will not get nominated
And there goes my influencer of the year,
this
right there.
year. No worries, Josh. Next year.
There, exactly. And if you can grow and improve, again, this is what leads to long term success, not trying to bet everything on just one game, on this one magnum opus. It's going to, make you question every aspect of your life after you play it, but it takes 30 hours before the game actually starts.
Right, right.
Thank you, Pony. Did you tell him that I completely beat the game in 40 minutes on stream? I did not refund seasons. I bought it for like whatever the price was, because I didn't feel right about returning after I beat the entire game 100%.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'm not going to be like that guy who did with the Sonic game. I beat it and I refunded it at the same time.
Speed run it. I left tough love. Oh, good, good. Leave some love.
But I think that's all I have to say. Any final points from you?
I think that basically sums it up. I mean, just always, if don't forget, if when we're chasing, don't be chasing another medium. Video games are their own
Mm-hmm.
medium, and it is a separate medium. And when you try to be something else, you come off of as not authentic and not the same, and you're missing aspects of what makes you whole and souls of the video game. So remember, it's a video game at its heart and soul, and that's what it should be. Know your market, playtest.
Mm-hmm.
Always join the Discord, Josh's Discord, buy some books, and if you have any ideas, I think we have an idea for next week, and
Mm-hmm.
let us know.
And be sure to wishlist Samurai Pig
Wishlist
and
Samurai
check it out.
Pig. Yeah, definitely. And also, Rooster Rampage is there. Check that out. It is being worked on by a Splinter Cell division. So just check out Rooster Rampage and let's wishlist that one as well. And same thing, Josh.
Yep. Buy all the books. Buy
Books.
20 copies of my next book. Buy, again, we're growing. Buy 30 copies of the book after that. Just add 10 to every book that you buy.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
But we will be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET. Again, Discord, Patreon, Twitter for what it's worth for right now. Who knows what we'll be promoting next week or in a few days. And yep, if you're new, do the liking, subscribing, and commenting. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where it's on the art and science of games. Until our next show, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend.